Okay, here we go. The second video for Krafty Max Originals 9th bead-along. Now, if you've gone all the way around, then when you lay this down, and it is very hard sometimes to measure, and that's where practice also comes in, because oftentimes the cabochon or whatever you're using is too thin to really gauge the wall. But what you want to do is look to make sure it's going to fit all the way around with a little bit of give. You don't want it so tight that it's up on the edges. So you've done one round. Time to do a second round. And again, this is basic peyote. We're going to use the blue still. This is fill in the down, add a bead, you fill in the down and make it an up. Okay, so some of you that haven't done peyote, what you're going to do is when you pick up the bead, there is a down right here. You're going to fill this down in by going through there and making it an up. Okay, so we're going to do this all the way around one more time. Now, when you're doing the side walls, the biggest thing to remember is that you want the side walls at least 1 bead row to 2 bead rows thicker than the thickest part on your cabochon. So see, if I was only to do 2 rows, it would be just about the same thickness here with a little bit of overlay. By doing the 3rd row, it's going to be at least 1 row higher. And the reason is because when we start pulling in, we want it to grab the edge of the wall and pull it in, not just use the tiny beads to make that edge. That will put too much stress on the beads. So if you're going to do 2 or 3 stitches at a time, just make sure that you're going around, filling the downs and going through the up. Keep your tension very tight on these projects. You do not want loose beads. If you have noticed on this very first round that you've twisted a little, it's okay. Just straighten it out. If it's a really bad twist, it means your tension was either way too tight or way too loose. So you should be able to just kind of maneuver the beads into the right spot by just kind of turning them and placing them in the right area. Again, keeping that tension very tight. And it helps to use that dead tail as an anchor. See how I keep this pretty tight and the tension on here tight? Okay, we're going to get rid of that dead tail here in a minute, but not quite yet. So, just going to kind of kill some time so I can get all the way around on this row. And if you notice, I do 4 or 5, and then I pull it. I don't do probably too many more than about 4 or 5, maybe 6 at the very most, because then what happens is, again, you put too much stress on your thread. It starts to fray the thread, and it starts to weaken the beads, because when you pull, especially very fast, you're doing the same thing as you are with like a cutter, because you're getting the heat and the friction on those beads. And so oftentimes if you pull too fast or too hard through, say, 10 or 15 beads, you'll actually get a nick in your little glass beads where the friction has worn. Well, the next time that gets pulled, that means it breaks. You'll also notice that when I pull, I turn my work. Okay, see, this one overlaps, so I've got to undo that one. I pull my work so that the thread is coming the same direction as I'm beading. I'm not pulling it like this or pulling it like this. I'm pulling it right along that same path in the same direction. What will happen is that it goes much smoother. If you try and fight the thread and fight the beads, not only could you snag the thread, fray the thread, hurt the beads, but it's really hard on your hands. This thread is very strong and will cut your hands. I actually have calluses right here from where I pull all the time with my thread. And when I'm doing a big project or I'm on deadline or something and I'm working really fast and hard, oftentimes I have to put band-aids on my hands because I actually will wear through the calluses. So good steady tension, only 4 or 5, maybe 6 at the absolute most, and pull it straight in line. We're almost done with this row and we'll go to the next step. I want to get you started on the next step before I go to the next video though. And unfortunately, Facebook and YouTube and some of the other places that I post some of these videos have 15-minute maximum. So I try and only stay at about 12 or 13 minutes per video. That's why there's so many. And it also gives you a chance to catch up and work. But please feel free to contact me with any questions or pause it and complete it. I know that I go a bit faster than especially somebody starting out. So if you have to, pause it, catch up with me, and then keep going. Almost to the end. Now, if you have done bead-alongs with me before, or if you're familiar with beading and you happen to have an extra needle, then that will come in handy for the next part. You can slide this needle off and do what we're going to do without that by just using the same needle. But if you have an extra needle, it's much more convenient. All right, I'm coming up to here, so I'm going to flatten this out. Coming up to the joint. See how I turn that a little bit so it's in the right line. And I'm going to fill this in. Picking up a bead, filling in the down, and making it up. Now this time I'm going to go up, step up one row because I'm finished with this row. And if you get a knot, by the way, most of the time it will pull out. Always try and pull your tail loose. Okay, so here I am. And I'm going to fit this on. Now that I have the third row, you can see how nice and easy it fits on there. Now, if you have that second needle, go ahead and grab it if you haven't already. If you don't have a second needle, slide off the needle you have and move it over to the dead tail and put it on. Okay. Now, if you had enough to wrap it around your finger, say 5 or 6 times, you should have a pretty good tail length. If you didn't, and you only have a very short tail, then what you're going to need to do is kind of skip this section and wait until I show you how to end your thread. But if you've got a good tail, I've got probably about a foot here, I'm going to use this. I'm not just going to throw that thread away. So if you look carefully, you will see where your tail is coming out of. Mine is coming out of here, going that direction. So move your thread, and it doesn't matter whether you go to the left or the right. A lot of that has to do with your preference, but move the thread along the path of the threads that have come before it. So you see how I'm moving it? It's coming out of this one right here, and this would be my next stitch, and then this would be my next stitch. Okay, again, doesn't matter if you do the left or the right, it's up to you. Now, what we're going to do is start tightening up. We're going to use this thread to fill in some row. So we're going to use the white 15-ohs. These are the littler ones that have the donut, but we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to pick one up, fill in the down, and make it an up. Now, it's not going to be as tall. It's going to kind of look like it's sitting down in there. That's okay. That's what we want. You're going to do several. Then you're going to pull it tight. Now, you don't have to pull it so tight that it breaks the beads, okay? So a good tight tension, a good snug tension is what you want. And you'll notice it kind of pulls in a little bit, okay? You're going to want to keep going around, and about every 4 or 5 beads, stop and pull your tension. And I don't mean just pull the thread out. Okay, so here I am just pulling the thread out. I'm going to actually put my needle down and put a little tension on it. See how it kind of curves in there a little bit? Okay, we don't need it to curve the whole way because this is only first row, but we do need it to curve a little. So I'm going to do 4 or 5. Okay, one more here so I can show you again. And pull the thread. Now I'm going to come back and pull the tension. See how it's curving in? All right, we're going to do this all the way around. Now, depending on how much tail you had, depends on how far you go. Some of you will get 4 or 5 stitches. Some of you will get all the way around. Some of you will get more than that, but we're only going to try and do one round and then tie off, and I'll show you how to tie off in just a moment. Again, no knots. Okay, so even though I don't want to waste thread, because my video is coming down to the point where I'm going to have to stop, I'm going to show you how to end or start a thread. No knots. So if you've done peyote before, you do the same thing. You're going to follow the path. We're going to pull that tension really tight and see how it's coming out here. We're going to go back this way for a stitch or two. Okay. Then we're going to go forward. Now, what I want to do is go around because it's much harder. See how I'm going back again? Now I've gone all the way around those two beads and I'm going to go forward again. It's much harder to work out something that's in a circle than it is in a straight line like that. So I'm going to do that twice. Again, I'm just moving the thread where the beads are. Now I'm going to do it here. So I'm going around. See, I've made a circle. Pull it tight. Now you also do not want to cut the thread right up against wherever you made that last round. Okay, you always want to move it just a little, because that way if it does pull, and it's got some tail to work through before it starts to unwind itself. Once you get to a point where you're going to cut it, you're going to use your scissors, sharp, sharp, sharp scissors. You're going to pull up a little bit on the work, make some tension, okay, and snip. Now, if you're starting a new thread, if at some point you have to start a new thread, same process. Start it in, go around a couple times, and then take off. Leave a little bit of tail to cut at the end. Okay? That's the end of this video. I'll see you on the next one, and I'll show you how to make up the difference on this round.